My name is Bethany Rickman, and this is my action research proposal. My action research concerns supporting English learners in a language arts classroom, specifically in the domain of academic argumentative writing. And the concern behind this issue is that there's a growing English learner population in schools, which means there's more linguistically diverse classrooms and more need to find strategies that are effective and can support these diverse students. In middle school, which is the grade level that I teach, there is a shift toward more academic writing using informational text as supports. So there's a need to help English learners make that shift while also acquiring the language. And there is a need for higher order thinking skills with significant linguistic support for these students. So we need to be encouraging higher levels of thought and thought processes while also still maintaining that scaffolding and language support for them at the same time. I will be conducting qualitative and quantitative research. So I will be looking at test scores and the word count and length of argumentative writing in my participants, but also be looking at the attitudes about writing and speaking in class and how those change over time, as well as whether or not more and more complex language is used over time and whether that language use transfers to writing. So the overall topic that I wanted to explore in my action research is whether or not art can support language and literacy acquisition. From there, I narrowed down my research question to, will consistent visual thinking strategies in an integrated arts classroom improve the quality and quantity of 7th grade EL's argumentative writing? So I wanted to choose a specific arts-based strategy, visual thinking strategies, to explore and see how it could affect a specific literacy domain such as argumentative writing, which is very important in the middle school grade levels. Some related sub-questions that I also want to explore is whether or not visual thinking strategies can provide a safe and comfortable environment for ELs to express higher order thinking skills. So again, creating that space for language scaffolding and support, but also encouraging higher order thinking skills. And then also, if VTS encourages the use of more and more complex language and communication, and does this influence or transfer to EL's argumentative writing? So looking at how over time the discussion aspect of visual thinking strategies, whether or not it prompts ELs to continue using more and more complex language, and then comparing that to their writing samples and seeing if there is transfer from the discussion to their writing. The main purpose of this study is to determine whether or not an arts-based strategy, specifically visual thinking strategies, supports middle school English learners in argumentative writing. And in addition to that, I'm also looking for whether or not it encourages that more complex language use and whether or not that transfers to writing. And if VTS also can create a safe and comfortable learning environment for English learners. The significance of this study is that it fills research gaps. There is not a lot of research that looks at whether or not incorporating arts into a language arts classroom is effective. There's a lot that shows that incorporating language into a visual arts classroom is very effective, but I want to see if the same occurs in reverse. And also this will provide another additional or alternative strategy for supporting English learners in the language arts classroom. So A lot of language arts teachers struggle to find truly effective strategies for supporting English learners in their classroom. And if the intended outcomes of this action research show to be true, then this will provide a very easy and effective strategy for language arts teachers to incorporate into their classroom. In Chapter 2 of my action research proposal, I explore the existing literature regarding whether or not the arts can support language and literacy acquisition for English language learners. And I discovered that there are 4 main areas in which the arts can support English learners. The first area is that the arts provide social, emotional, and cultural supports. One study by Ingraham and Newtall in 2016 focused on an elementary school that emphasized the arts across their academic curriculum. And in this study, they found that students had increased confidence, integrity, and collaboration with peers, which then translated to higher test scores in English language learners. Mabry in 2017 found that art can be a bridge between at-home and school literacies. So this study had students take photographs of themselves using their at-home literacies and bring them back to school, which gave them a sense of their cultural identity in the classroom and a sense that they are already literacy experts. And this idea is supported by Thomas in an article in 2017 that arts classrooms should be heteroglossic. In other words, they should be incorporating language 1 and language 2 within the classroom. Smillen from 2017 also found that arts can be a window into a student's culture by viewing their cultural symbols and metaphors. So this can be a great way to get to know English learners and the cultural assets that they bring to the classroom. The second area where arts can support English learners is that it provides multimodal learning. So Lombardi in 2008 found that combining art and literacy forces students to use their entire brain, so it engages both the left and right hemispheres. Britch in 2009 also found that language acquisition naturally occurs in tandem with visuals. So even as babies, we are seeing visuals and then connecting that with the sounds associated with language. So in the classroom, the same process should be mirrored as what occurs in nature. Renish in 2017 found that multiple modalities, including art, showed an improvement on reading and writing assessments for her students. So she incorporated language into her visual arts classroom and assessed her students with a RAP assessment and found that those English learners who engaged in multiple modalities had better test scores overall. The third area in which arts can support English learners is in growth in speaking and listening. One study conducted by Mandel in 2018 showed that art allows for positive communication between English learners and all students. They looked at 3 different arts-based strategies and found that positive communication increased regardless of the strategy employed. So whether or not it was a collaborative or an independent strategy, the fact that the teacher allowed for students to engage in the arts improved positive communication. Several studies found that visual thinking strategies support English learners in a multitude of ways. So Anderson, Muller, Cutler, Fielder, and Weir, Yenawine, Hausen, and Rakowitz all found that visual thinking strategies promote critical thinking and discussion. It encourages storytelling. It also encourages discussion because it spans cultural boundaries. So no matter what culture the students identify with, the art unifies all students. Likewise, it levels the playing field between ELs and non-ELs. So regardless of language levels, all students, especially middle school students, have a similar experience and exposure to the arts. So it levels the playing field as far as content is concerned. And lastly, visual thinking strategies automatically aligns with the Common Core because it promotes higher order thinking and skills found in the Common Core standards. The last area where English learners are supported by the arts is the potential for growth in reading and writing. So Yum in 2018 found that visual thinking strategies does show transfer from discussion to reading and writing. So the visual thinking strategy discussions that he held with his students caused them to become more purposeful readers and therefore better writers. However, Zelvis in 2008 found that visual thinking strategies does not have much effect on students, especially where motivation is concerned. So they exposed all of their participants to visual thinking strategies and also measured their motivation to read and found that only those with higher intrinsic motivation improved their reading scores despite similar exposure across the board to VTS. In 2015, a study was conducted using wordless picture books. So moving away from VTS, this study found that English learners were supported in their reading, and particularly in their higher order thinking skills related to reading, by using wordless picture books. So they were able to make connections, inferences, and determine literary elements such as theme without the use of language, simply by using these picture books. Another study in 2011 showed that art can be used to support vocabulary and grammar. So whether it's using visual images to prompt vocabulary and grammar, or allowing students to create art expressing what they know about vocabulary and grammar, either way, art can be used as a vocabulary and grammar support. And lastly, Marino in 2018 and McGuire all the way back in 1984 found that students who participate in after-school art programs, there's a correlation between that and their reading test scores. So simply being involved in art can improve test scores in reading. In the third chapter of my action research proposal, I lay out the methodology for my research. Now, because this is action research, I do intend to use it personally to improve my teaching with the students and school site that I am associated with. So therefore, participants in the setting are 7th grade English learners in an integrated language arts classroom, because that is what I have access to. However, I've designed the research so that it could be replicated in a similar setting with similar participants. As I mentioned already, this action research has a quantitative and qualitative element to it. So the instruments used for the quantitative data will be pre and post writing assessments from the writing units of study on demand prompt, and those will be scored using the SBAC rubric. The qualitative instruments will be interviews, surveys, and audio and video recordings. The interviews will be conducted with participants to gauge their attitudes toward discussion and writing in class. And they will be provided surveys to help prompt their answers to the interview questions. Likewise, those interviews will be audio recorded so they can be listened to again, and students' answers can be recorded in a data logbook. And for the video recording, all of the visual thinking strategy lessons will be recorded and analyzed to see how what type of language students are using during VTS discussions, and those video recordings will be transcribed into a data log book to look for patterns in language use. So the procedure for this study will start with the researcher gathering all the permissions they need from participants and parents and other teachers as well as administration. And then the pre-assessment will be delivered at the beginning of the year before any instruction has been given. Right before the argumentative writing unit, the researcher will conduct initial interviews with all participants and provide surveys for them. They will then teach the argumentative writing unit, and 3 times per week they will incorporate visual thinking strategies. During this time, there will be a subsequent interview, so a midpoint interview to gauge whether or not attitudes and comfort levels are changing, as well as recording those VTS lessons to see if language use is changing over time. And once the unit has wrapped, they will conduct a final interview and a post-assessment to be compared to the pre-assessment. Various quantitative and qualitative data will be collected in several ways. First, the quantitative data for the pre and post assessments will be recorded and stored in Elluminate. This is to allow for access for multiple researchers or administrators, as well as allowing for ease of reading and scoring assessments. However, if a researcher were to replicate this study without access to Elluminate, they could use Google Classroom as an alternative. Surveys and audio recorded interviews will be collected on paper for the surveys and stored in the data logbook, and audio recorded interviews will be kept on my personal iPhone, although it could be done on several different types of devices. Video recording of VTS lessons will be also stored on my iPhone and uploaded to a video storage site such as Vimeo. And transcriptions will be written down and recorded in a data logbook, which is where I will also keep other information about the research and participants, such as LPAC scores, SPAC scores, IEP and 504 information, permission slips, and any other relevant information to the study. The data will be analyzed by comparing pre and post assessment scores as well as the word count. This will be the quantitative data to determine whether or not visual thinking strategies support English learners in their argumentative writing and whether or not it increases the quality and quantity of their writing. Transcriptions from the video recorded lessons will be compared to the post assessments of participants. So for instance, if we note patterns of more and more complex language use in the transcriptions over time and find that same language in participants' post-assessments, we will know that visual thinking strategies can cause transfer from discussion to writing. Lastly, we will analyze the survey scores recorded in the data logbook from participants and compare the 3 interviews to determine whether or not attitudes and comfort levels in the classroom increased over time. Thank you for watching and listening to my action research proposal. The next 2 slides contain the references from my literature review.